Now for global business updates, Rotus Oddiri joins us. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Dr. Basi. Good morning, Vimbai. Good morning, Rufai. All our viewers out there. August the 1st is tomorrow. That is the new deadline. The nations are scrambling to get some deals. We hear that some delegations from Canada, Mexico went to the White House. They're talking. South Korea, look, for now, if you want to know U.S. fiscal policy, just go to Donald Trump's Truth Social page because he posted so many things yesterday. Anyway, so we're able to glean that South Korea has agreed a deal. 15% tariff. They're going to spend $350 billion on the U.S. I mean, you can see the model here. It's just basically replicated across different countries. Everybody, you accept a higher tariff, you will pay some money, you will commit to invest in U.S. energy and so on. The South Koreans said they will switch some of their purchases from the Middle East. Who is the top LNG exporter in the Middle East? I think it's the UAE. I think it's Qatar, sorry. Qatar is the top exporter there. So they're going to shift some of their LNG purchases from Qatar and buy from the United States. He said India is going to get a 25% tariff by August 1st, although they are still talking as we speak. He also said there'll be a penalty for India buying oil from Russia. Remember, there's 10 days to go. He's giving Russia 10 days to find a solution with Ukraine. If not, something is going to happen. He's attached a 50% tariff, in fact, on Brazil. Apparently, they've also sanctioned the judge who is overseeing Bolsonaro. That is the former president of Brazil, overseeing Bolsonaro's case. Brazil also. So, look, 24 hours ago, we'll see what happens. We expect a flurry of activity. Meanwhile, this is not getting enough attention. Oral arguments in lawsuits that have been brought forward by small businesses that are challenging the powers of the president to be able to enact these tariffs. Oral arguments begin today in a federal circuit court. If you remember, back on May the 29th, the U.S. International Court for Trade struck down the tariffs, saying that they were illegal. But then the federal circuit court now stayed that decision and said, look, we'll keep the tariffs in place until we commit. So there are a number of lawsuits with small businesses who have been impacted. And now you're starting to see, particularly inflation for goods, for apparel and automobiles, starting to creep up and impact these companies. So this is a solicitor in a law firm, Ted Murphy, is a partner at and head of global trade practice at Sydney Austin. He says, I think the tariffs are at risk. The law has never been used for this purpose and it's being used quite broadly. So I think these are legitimate questions. The law he's referring to is IEEPA. I think it's International Economic Emergency Powers Act, which Trump has says gives him the power to basically enact these tariffs. Piper Sandler is a financial services boutique. Their policy analyst said Trump will probably continue to lose in the lower courts, and we believe the Supreme Court is highly unlikely to rule in his favor. It's 6-3 in favor of the conservatives, and I think he's appointed by 3 of those judges. So this thing could go all the way to the Supreme Court, whether or not, and everything could just, I don't know if anyone remembers the Kanye West song, All Falls Down, but everything could just, pack up like, yeah, exactly. Great song. So everything could fall apart if, but we'll have to see how the courts rule. Meanwhile, Trump also was touting the latest Q2 GDP figures for America. This was flash estimate. So it grew at 3%, but people are looking under the hood and saying there's some things to notice here. If you think of the makeup of GDP, consumer spending, business investment, government spending. So it contracted by 0.5% in the first quarter, grew at 3% in the second. But look, consumer spending rose 0.5% in Q1, 1.4%. Look at business spending. It was 10.3% in the first quarter of the year. It dropped to 1.9%. And then also look at inventories. Q1, you had $160 billion worth of inventories for the first quarter. In Q2, it contracted by $26 billion, which is supposed to bolster the point that a lot of businesses started front-loading on inventories to try to beat the tariffs back when we had Liberation Day and all that. Then net exports, Q1, about 1.3 trillion worth, now contracted, which suggests that they were, flooding. Imports were just, exports essentially were coming in, and then that switched. There was a lot of volatility there, right? So, cracks are starting to show, and inflation is starting to rise. Inflation now brings us to Jerome Powell, who held rates and actually sounded a bit hawkish yesterday in his post-FOMC decision remarks. There were 2 dissenters on the FOMC. We haven't seen that since 1993, but some suggest there may be politics there. I think his name is Waller, one of the members of the board, who they're thinking could be the next Fed governor. So he's starting to oppose him now to position himself. Who knows? Either way, before this meeting, there was a 60%, the markets were priced in a 60% chance of a rate cut in September. After the meeting, those odds went down to 45%. Powell is saying until we see the full impact of the tariffs on inflation, we cannot make a decision. And even before the meeting, Trump posted on Truth Social, he doesn't think Powell is going to reduce rates. Just to round up, anyway, tomorrow is our Eye on Tech. We'll get into Microsoft and Meta, but both of them beat their earnings and their shares popped in after hours trading. But just to round up with Africa, electricity. So many energy headlines. South Africa is seeking to expand its grid, Rufai and Vimbai. Do you know how much they're looking for to expand their grid? $22 to $25 billion over the next 10 years.
Rotus, you won't mention that I sent you videos of protests in South Africa because of these issues.
Yes, either you want, see,
you will not mention that
either
one.
you want
Please,
the investment or you don't. You can protest all you want. Okay, thank you, Rufai. Okay, secondly, the AFDB, the African Development Bank, your sarcasm, the African Development Bank has committed $1.2 billion to feasibility studies for battery electric storage systems. This is supposed to, again, to expand the grid for Nigeria. Then Nigeria is eyeing another 4,200 megawatts of solar power by 2030 to add to the grid. They've attracted 440 million in CNG investments, and the NNPCL says PH refinery is not for sale. They're not going to sell it.
No, that's not. I mean,
Atiku said he would sell it if he won the election.
The truth is, but that's the best thing to do. It's not. Olusegun Obasanjo sold this thing long ago. The ruiners of Nigeria went to deceive President Yar'Adua. Look at where we are today, 18 trillion down the line. Rotus, but with due respect, just like the way you will not bring in videos of protests.
It's not a business story.
It's not a I know. Just like the way Rotus, if you had watched this news that you broke down, that you analyzed, that we are seeing how businesses are suffering in America. It's not the way Fox News reported it, because I watched Fox News yesterday. In fact, they said, numbers never lie. Trump tariff gamble pays off in a big way. 3.0% second quarter growth. They didn't break it like this, so I'm surprised. Because I watch Fox, so because some people were accusing me that he doesn't watch Fox. Biased, anything. But I watch Fox, but Rotus, the way you now balanced it, some people by my side. I mean, I don't know what's going on. So what if so businesses are suffering in America with this 3%.
They are worried, though.
They are worried.
In fact, tomorrow, Adidas shares
don't
tanked.
say too much.
Oh, okay, sorry.
It's enough, isn't it?
Apparel and automobiles, they're really suffering.
They're really suffering.
Ford, GM, the motorcycle, Harley Davidson, Adidas, apparel and automobiles.
Don't say too much. Don't say too much. Fox News say otherwise.
Very
Fox News.
Serious bunch of guys. I actually want to focus on Russia very quickly. The issue of Russian oil, and I'm not sure if you saw the spat that happened on X between Dmitry Medvedev and Lindsey Graham, and then Trump later chimed in. But for me, the key takeaway was about the sanctions and how Russia has figured out how to, when there were sanctions on Zimbabwe, we called it sanction busting, which is that you sit down with your cabinet and you say, this is what we're going to do to work our way around the sanctions. And now Russia is flooding the world with this cheap oil. We've even seen the headlines here in Nigeria where there are complaints as well about how Russian oil is making the industry uncompetitive locally. So interesting to see that, India, China also falling into that. I was reading from the Indian press and they were talking about, how some people have, just made so much money because of this influx of Russian oil and how they've been able to turn it around. So a conversation around sanctions and how we need to evolve the concept of sanctions so it can become effective and impactful, because people have figured out how to work their way around economic sanctions.
And oil is up, by the way.
Let's interrogate the idea behind these tariffs that Trump is focusing upon. When he assumed office, he said, look, many countries have trade surplus against the United States. And, his mission is to correct that trade deficit. Now, on April 2, what he called Liberation Day. He announced tariffs baseline of 10% against countries. Then he said, there will be a window for negotiations. He moved the post to July 2. And nothing happened. And then after July 2, he moved it to August 1, which is tomorrow. And which Scott Bessent says is a hard line. After that, countries will get a baseline of 15 to 20%. However, now Peter Navarro was saying that, they can do deals of 90 in 90 days. President Trump says, 120 deals, yes. Within the intervening period is what he's looking at. How much success has he made? Now, only 8 countries have been able to cut a deal, including the Philippines, the UK, the EU, Vietnam, Japan, and, just 9 of them. Yeah. Now, what do you have on the table now? There's a paradox, which is where I'm going. Now, what is Trump really believing, or does he believe in this idea of trade deficit versus trade surplus? Take his partiality to the UK. Now, in the case of the UK, he says out of respect for King Charles, that UK will just have 10%. Okay? And that was celebrated. In other words, those that are friendly, yes. that are in the right club, he's very lenient to them. Yeah. But if you are not on the side of the US, or you are a friend to those he considers enemies, then you get sanctioned. Yep. That's the logic behind India getting 25%. He says, India is our friend, but India has a trade surplus, and then they are going to be sanctioned for buying Russian oil. He said Russian energy, and all of that. And that's a signal that other countries that buy a lot of oil and gas from Russia are likely to be sanctioned. And China. That will include China, India, as has been pointed out, and then, of course, Brazil. Brazil is also in that loop. So this is the hypocrisy in all of this. The countries that are even his own allies in terms of trade partners, like Canada, like Mexico, they are hanging in the balance. Yeah. Okay, South Korea is one of those countries, 15%, Okay, now, to the issue of the Federal Reserve. After all, Trump was boasting that, the Federal Reserve is going to lower rates. He even went to the headquarters, trying to intimidate Jerome Powell. Yeah. However, for the first time in a long time, the FOMC voted 9-2. Yep. Previously, it used to be unanimous. Yes. Could that be the influence of Trump's, exertions? But however, what we see is that the Federal Reserve has maintained its independence. Indeed. Basically.
Indeed. Yes, indeed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.